My boyfriend of 5 years said I was just for fun, while his ex was marriage material. 6 months later, his cousin proposed to me. Imagine spending 5 years building a life with someone, thinking you're there forever, only to discover you were nothing more than a temporary placeholder. A convenient distraction until the real woman came along. My entire world shattered in an instant, and what came next was a roller coaster of betrayal, heartbreak, and a shocking twist I never saw coming. Ryan and I, we were practically inseparable. 5 years together, three of them living in the same apartment, splitting rent, managing a joint account for bills. You know, all the grown-up stuff that makes you feel like you're truly building something. His family didn't just tolerate me, they embraced me. Every holiday, every family dinner, I was right there, welcomed with open arms. His mom, bless her heart, would always call me her future daughter-in-law, and Ryan would just flash that charming smile of his and give my hand a reassuring squeeze. We talked about marriage a lot, actually, not in a pushy way, but like a natural, inevitable next step. He'd always say he wanted to do it right, save up for a beautiful ring, plan a proposal that I truly deserved. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We had 5 years of shared memories, shared dreams, shared life. Everything felt perfect. Then, his cousin Ethan came back. Ethan had been working overseas for a while, and his return sparked this big reunion night out. Ryan and Ethan, plus a few old friends, were going to catch up. I was actually supposed to go, but you know how it is. Work emergency, last minute, had to cancel. Ryan told me he'd be home early since it was just catching up with family. So, I waved him off, thinking nothing of it. He didn't walk through our door until 4 o'clock in the morning, absolutely plastered. Like, completely, embarrassingly wasted. The next day, Ethan, bless his social butterfly heart, found me on social media. He added me, started commenting on my posts, sending funny memes. Ryan just shrugged it off, saying, "Oh, Ethan's always like that. Super social, friendly with everyone." I actually thought it was sweet, like his cousin genuinely wanted to get to know me better, which was nice after 5 years of just being Ryan's girlfriend. 2 weeks later, the whole family was at Ryan's friend Todd's barbecue. It was a beautiful day, lots of laughter, loud conversations. I went inside to grab more drinks from the kitchen, and as I was reaching for the cooler, I heard them. The kitchen window was open, and the guys were right outside on the patio, their voices carrying clearly. "Todd, probably having a few beers in him," asked Ryan. "So, when are you finally gonna propose, man? You two have been together forever." Ryan laughed. That's when my blood ran cold. He laughed, and then he said, and I quote, "Marriage is for girls you want to build something real with, not girls like her who are just for fun." Just for fun. Me. My hand was still on the cold beer bottles, but my whole body felt like it was on fire, then turning to ice. His friend asked what he meant, and Ryan, casual as ever, just said, "Some girls you date, and some girls you marry." And then, the gut punch that stole my breath. I've already met the girl I want to marry back in college. Alyssa, my first girlfriend. She dumped me sophomore year, but she's the one who got away. He actually said he still checked her social media every single day. He said I was convenient and fun, but when Alyssa was ready to settle down, he'd be right there, waiting for her. And they all laughed. Laughed about how I kept dropping hints about rings and wedding venues while Ryan was just running out the clock. I stood in that kitchen, holding those beers, my entire world disintegrating around me. 5 years of my life. 5 years with someone who saw me as nothing more than a placeholder. Every "I love you," every future plan we'd made. It was all just him killing time, a convenient charade. The pain was physical, a crushing weight in my chest. Somehow I walked back outside. I acted completely normal. Handed out the beers, sat next to Ryan. Even let him put his arm around me. My skin was crawling, every nerve screaming, but I kept that fake smile plastered on my face. Because in that moment, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was planning. The first thing I did was stop. Stop doing all the girlfriend things Ryan had come to expect, taken for granted. No more packing his lunch. No more doing his laundry with mine. No more reminding him about his mom's birthday or scheduling his appointments. My energy was now reserved for me. Meanwhile, Ethan kept texting me. Funny stuff, silly memes. And I started responding more, having actual conversations. He'd ask about my day, and he'd remember things I told him. He complimented me on a recent promotion at work, a promotion Ryan hadn't even noticed, let alone acknowledged. So, when Ethan asked if I wanted to grab coffee and catch up, since despite dating his cousin for years, we barely knew each other, I said yes. And it wasn't just coffee. We talked for 3 hours. He told me he was impressed with how I handled Ryan's family, especially his incredibly difficult sister, Cheryl, who frankly hated everyone. He said Ryan was lucky to have someone so patient and understanding. I almost cried right there in the coffee shop. It was the first time in months anyone had said something genuinely nice about me as a partner. It was like I was finally being seen. Those coffee dates turned into weekly meetings, then lunches, then dinners when Ryan was conveniently working late, which, let's be honest, was always. Ethan would pick restaurants I'd casually mentioned wanting to try. He remembered how I liked my coffee, specifically, and he'd always ask about presentations I was nervous about. It was everything Ryan should have been doing, but simply wasn't. After 2 months of this, Ethan told me. He had feelings for me. He knew it was complicated, he said, because of Ryan. But he just couldn't stand by and watch his cousin waste what we had. He said Ryan talked about me like I was temporary, and it made him sick because I deserved someone who saw me as their future, not their placeholder. He even admitted he'd been in love with me since that very first family dinner, years ago, when I helped his grandmother with her walker without even being asked. That night, I went home, and I told Ryan we needed to talk. I laid it all out. The barbecue, the window, Alyssa, the just for fun comment. His face went white. He started scrambling, stuttering, saying it was just guy talk, that he didn't mean it, that he loved me. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "If you love me, then propose. Right now." He couldn't do it. After 5 years, he said, "I'm not ready." That was it. That night, I packed my bags. Ethan helped me move into my new apartment. The next day, my phone was blowing up. Ryan's calls, texts, nonstop, begging me to come back, swearing we could work it out, promising he'd propose if that's what I wanted. Too little, too late. A month later, Ethan and I were officially together. The news broke at the next family dinner, the one where Ryan lost his mind. His chair scraped against the floor, a sound so loud it cut through all conversation. He stood up so fast his water glass toppled, spilling across the pristine white tablecloth. His face was scarlet, hands shaking as he pointed across the table at Ethan and me, sitting together. Ethan's hand found mine under the table, a gentle, steady squeeze. While Ryan started yelling, his voice cracking with rage, accusing us of betrayal, of stabbing him in the back. His mom looked confused at first, her eyes darting between us, trying to piece together the puzzle. Then she saw our joined hands, and her expression slowly shifted to a dawning, pained understanding. His dad, ever the patriarch, calmly put down his fork and told Ryan to sit down, to lower his voice, reminding him they were having a family dinner. But Ryan ignored him completely. He kept yelling, declaring to the entire table that I had left him for his cousin, twisting the narrative to make it sound like I'd cheated while we were still together. He painted Ethan as the villain who swooped in and stole his girlfriend, destroying their family. Gasps rippled through the room. His aunt covered her mouth with a napkin. My stomach dropped. He was making himself the victim. Ethan, calm and collected, let go of my hand and slowly stood up. Not aggressively, but with an unwavering firmness. He looked Ryan directly in the eye. His voice was level, almost impossibly calm, as he stated, "She was single when we started dating. She broke up with you a month before, Ryan. She moved out and ended things completely before anything happened between us." He told Ryan he needed to accept that we were together now and stop making these scenes. Ryan's face got even redder. He called Ethan a liar. Then, something completely unexpected happened. Cheryl, Ryan's difficult sister, who had always seemed to despise me, who made snide comments about my clothes and my job, who was cold at every family event, Cheryl stood up. She looked at Ryan with an expression of pure disgust. "Ryan," she said, her voice sharp, "stop embarrassing yourself." She continued, "I always knew you didn't appreciate what you had with her. She was patient and kind, and she dealt with our difficult family better than anyone. I'm glad she found someone who actually values her." She then turned her gaze to me, softening, and added, "Ethan, you're lucky to have her. I hope you two are very happy." My mouth literally fell open. I never, In a million years, expected Cheryl to defend me. Now Ryan was yelling at his sister, calling her a traitor, too. That's when his mom finally intervened, standing up and commanding them both to stop. She then grabbed my arm, pulling me gently but firmly towards the kitchen. We walked past the stunned dining room, through the swinging door, into the bright kitchen that still smelled faintly of roasted chicken. She turned to face me, her eyes clouded with worry. Her voice was gentle, but I could tell she needed to understand. "What really happened, honey?" she asked. Taking a deep breath, I told her. About Todd's barbecue. About standing in the kitchen, holding those beers, listening to Ryan tell his friends I was just for fun, not wife material. That he was waiting for his ex, Alyssa. I watched her face change as I spoke. Her eyes grew shiny with tears, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked like I'd just delivered devastating news. I explained that after 5 years of him calling me his future, finding out I was just a placeholder broke something in me that couldn't be fixed. She pulled me into a tight hug right there in the kitchen. She was shorter than me, so my chin rested on top of her head. "I am so sorry for how Ryan treated you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She said she genuinely thought we would get married, that she'd been planning her outfit for our wedding in her head. She pulled back, holding my shoulders, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It hurts me that my son wasted 5 years of your life when you gave him everything. I understand completely why you moved on. I don't blame you one bit for finding happiness with Ethan. He's a good man, and he'll treat you right." By then, I was crying too, and we hugged again. Through the kitchen door, I could still hear Ryan yelling in the dining room. Then, a door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Ryan's car engine roared to life in the driveway, tires squealing as he peeled out onto the street. The sound faded as he sped away. Ryan's mom and I walked back into the dining room. Everyone sat in uncomfortable silence, forks suspended midair. Then Eric, Ethan's older brother, leaned back in his chair, a wry smile playing on his lips. Ryan always was dramatic when things didn't go his way, he quipped. A few nervous laughs broke the tension. Ethan's dad made a joke about Ryan probably just needing to drive around and cool off. Slowly, people started picking up their forks again, passing dishes. Dinner continued, but everything felt awkward, forced. Still, Ethan's family made a real effort to include me. His aunt asked about my job, genuinely interested. His uncle recommended a new restaurant for Ethan and me to try. Ryan's grandmother, the one I'd helped with her walker years ago, reached across the table and patted my hand with her wrinkled one. "I'm glad you're sticking around the family, dear," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I could tell you were good people from the first time we met." I squeezed her hand back, a wave of gratitude washing over me. At least some of Ryan's family was firmly on my side. The next week was a nightmare. Ryan sent me text after text, dozens of them, at all hours. Some begged me to come back, promising we could work things out. Others called me horrible names for dating his cousin. He accused me of using Ethan to get back at him, said I never truly loved him, that I was destroying his family. The text got progressively nastier as the week went on. I meticulously screenshotted every single one, just in case I needed proof later. Then, I blocked his number. The immediate relief that washed over me when my phone finally stayed silent was immense. But Ryan wasn't done. He took to social media. He never mentioned me or Ethan by name, but it was painfully obvious who he was talking about. Posts about betrayal, about how families should be loyal. Quotes about snakes in the grass, and people showing their true colors. He even shared articles about moving on from toxic people. Mutual friends kept sending me screenshots, a mix of concern and morbid fascination. Ethan never looked at any of it. When I showed him some of the posts, he just shrugged. "Ryan can post whatever he wants," he said calmly. Getting worked up about it would just give him what he wants. I found that so incredibly attractive. Compared to Ryan's constant need for drama and attention, Ethan just focused on us and our relationship. Mila, my best friend, came over that Saturday with coffee and boxes. She was helping me finish unpacking my new apartment. I'd been living there for 6 weeks, but still had boxes in the closet, pictures leaning against walls. She looked at me, a little worried. "Are you really sure about moving on so fast from a 5-year relationship?" she asked gently. 6 weeks seems quick to be dating someone new. I understood her concern. "Mila," I explained, "I didn't emotionally leave Ryan 6 weeks ago. I left him the moment I heard that conversation at Todd's barbecue. I spent 2 months after that, living with him, going through the motions, feeling completely dead inside. I told her, so, really, it's been almost 4 months since my relationship actually ended in my heart. The official breakup and moving out? That was just making it legal. Mila nodded slowly, pulling dishes out of a box and organizing them in my kitchen cabinets. When you put it that way, she said, that makes total sense. Then, with her back still to me, she dropped a bombshell. I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. She admitted she never really liked Ryan. He always seemed to take you for granted, she said, and treated you like you should be grateful he was with you instead of the other way around. I watched you do everything for him while he barely noticed you existed half the time. She confessed she'd wanted to say something so many times, but she didn't want to be that friend who trashed my boyfriend. She figured I had to see it for myself, or I'd just get defensive. Then she turned around and looked at me directly. But Ethan, she said, Ethan is completely different from what I've seen so far. He actually listens when you talk, and he remembers things you say. She added, I watched him look at you during the one dinner we all had together, and he looked at you like you were the most important person in the room. That's how someone should look at their partner. And Ryan never once looked at you that way in 5 years. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back, trying to act strong, and kept unpacking. 2 days later, Ethan picked me up for dinner. He wouldn't tell me where we were going, just said it was a surprise. We drove across town to this incredible Italian place I'd mentioned wanting to try, back when I was still with Ryan. I'd seen it featured in some food blog months ago and told Ryan about it one night. He'd just said it looked too expensive and never brought it up again. But Ethan remembered, even though it was just a random comment I'd made in passing. We walked in, and the host seated us at a cozy corner table, flickering candles, the whole romantic vibe. Ethan ordered wine and asked about my week. He actually cared about the details of my project at work and asked follow-up questions that showed he was truly paying attention. The food was amazing. We talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. He told me about his time overseas, the places he'd traveled. He asked about my family, genuinely interested in the stories I told about growing up. When the check came, he paid without making a big deal about it. Walking back to his car, I realized something profound. This was what being someone's priority actually felt like. This was what dating someone who saw me as important felt like. Ryan had never once taken me somewhere I specifically wanted to go or remembered random things I mentioned. The difference was staggering. The very next evening, I was at my new apartment, making dinner. There was a knock on my door. My stomach dropped. I looked through the peephole. It was Ryan. I hadn't given him my new address. I had no idea how he got it. I stood frozen, trying to decide what to do, when I heard Ethan's key in the lock. He'd started keeping some stuff at my place, had his own key. He walked in, saw my face, and immediately knew something was wrong. The knocking came again, louder this time. Ethan walked to the door and opened it. Ryan stood there, looking surprised to see his cousin. Ethan's voice was completely calm when he told Ryan, She doesn't want to see you, Ryan. You need to leave. Ryan's face turned red. I just want to talk to her. Ethan's response was firm. No. She's made it clear we're done, and you need to respect that. Ryan tried to peer past Ethan to see me, but Ethan shifted, blocking his view. Ryan's voice grew louder. You have no right to keep me from talking to her. Ethan remained perfectly calm. I have every right to protect my girlfriend from her ex who can't take no for an answer. Ryan put his hand on the doorframe, trying to push past Ethan into the apartment. Ethan didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the entire doorway with his body. He was bigger than Ryan, and it was obvious. Ryan tried to push harder, but Ethan didn't budge. His voice, still calm but firm, repeated, Back up, Ryan. Leave. Ryan finally stepped back, but he was yelling now. This isn't over. You can't hide behind Ethan forever. You owe me a conversation after 5 years together. Ethan's reply was chillingly effective. She doesn't owe you anything. And if you show up again, we'll call the police. Ryan stood there for another few seconds, as if weighing his options, considering another attempt. Then he turned and stomped down the hallway towards the stairs. Ethan stayed in the doorway, watching, until he heard the building door close. Then he shut our door, locked it, and put the chain on. He turned around, and I was shaking. My hands trembled, and I felt sick to my stomach. Ethan walked over and pulled me into a hug. I pressed my face against his chest, trying to regulate my breathing. He held me tight, murmuring, "It's okay. He's gone." We stood there for a long time until my shaking subsided. Then we sat on the couch, and Ethan, ever practical, said we should consider a restraining order if Ryan showed up again. He reiterated that Ryan showing up unannounced after I'd made it clear I didn't want contact was absolutely not okay. He offered to stay over more often so I wouldn't be alone if Ryan came back. I just nodded, leaning into him, feeling a fragile sense of safety. 3 days later, Ryan's mom called me. She asked if I was coming to Eric's birthday party that weekend. I hesitated, picturing the inevitable awkwardness, the tension, the confrontation with Ryan. But then she said, "Ryan won't be coming." I uninvited him after Ethan told me about the apartment incident. My jaw dropped. "I'm embarrassed by my son's behavior," she continued, "and I want you to feel safe at family events. Eric specifically wants you there, and honestly, the whole family wants to see you." I agreed to come. The party was at Ryan's parents' house that Saturday afternoon. Ethan and I walked in together, and his mom hugged me immediately, a genuine, warm embrace. His dad came over, shook Ethan's hand, and then turned to me. "I want to apologize for Ryan's behavior," he said, his expression serious. "I raised my son better than that, and I'm sorry he scared you at your apartment." Eric's wife, a kind woman, welcomed me warmly and handed me a drink. Throughout the afternoon, different family members went out of their way to talk to me, to make me feel included. Ryan's uncle asked about my job. His aunt recommended a book she thought I'd like. Eric thanked me for coming, telling me it meant a lot that I was still part of family events. It was clear they were all on my side. Later that afternoon, Cheryl found me alone in the kitchen, refilling my drink. She closed the door behind her and said she wanted to talk. I tensed up, expecting some fresh attack, but she surprised me. "I owe you an apology," she said. She admitted she'd been jealous of me when I was dating Ryan. "Mom always loved you, talked about you constantly," she confessed. "It felt like she cared more about you than her own daughter. She knew she'd been cold, sometimes mean, because of that irrational jealousy." Then she said something that truly shocked me. "But now that you're with Ethan instead of Ryan," she continued, a small smile playing on her lips, "I actually want to be friends." She explained that we weren't competing for their mom's attention anymore since I wasn't dating her brother. "I've been watching you with Ethan," she said, "and I can tell you're genuinely happy." She asked if we could start over. "Yes," I said, without even a second's hesitation. She hugged me right there in the kitchen. Over the next few weeks, Cheryl and I started meeting for coffee. And she was actually funny and smart when she wasn't being defensive. She told me stories about Ryan growing up, how he'd always been spoiled and entitled. Their parents gave him everything, she said, never made him work for anything. Their mom, she added, always made excuses for his bad behavior. She told me about his past girlfriends, how he treated them the exact same way he treated me, stringing them along for years before moving on to the next one. Hearing these stories explained so much about Ryan's attitude toward our relationship. He'd never learned that other people's feelings mattered. He'd never had to actually work to keep someone. One afternoon, Ethan came home from work looking unusually serious. He sat down next to me on the couch. "My boss offered me a big promotion," he announced. I started to get excited, until he explained the catch. The promotion would make his overseas position permanent. He'd have to move back abroad for at least 3 years. My heart sank, a familiar cold dread creeping in. But then he smiled. "I already turned it down," he said. He told his boss he'd just gotten back and found something more important than career advancement. He wasn't going anywhere. I just stared at him. My chest tightened, my eyes started burning. He turned down a huge career move. For me. For us. After 5 years with Ryan, who couldn't even commit to a timeline for getting engaged, here was Ethan making me his priority after only 6 months. "Are you sure?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. He pulled me close. "I've never been more certain about anything in my life," he promised. We stayed up late that night, talking about actual future plans. He said he wanted to be engaged within a year, married the year after that. He talked about wanting kids eventually, asking what I thought about timelines. He even mentioned neighborhoods he'd researched for good schools, even though kids were years away. Everything was specific, real, tangible. Not Ryan's constant "someday," and "we'll see," whenever I brought up our future. This was a partnership. The next week, I started hearing from mutual friends again. Ryan was telling people I'd cheated on him with Ethan, that I'd been sneaking around for months while we were still together, that I'd seduced his cousin to get back at him. My work friend texted me screenshots of what Ryan posted in a group chat with his friends. He made me sound like some horrible, vindictive person who destroyed his family. I felt sick reading the lies, but I didn't want to dignify them with a response. Then Todd, Ryan's friend, texted me out of nowhere, asking if we could talk. I was nervous. Todd was Ryan's friend. I figured he'd believe the lies. We met for coffee, and Todd immediately apologized. "I know the real timeline," he said. "Ryan told me you broke up clean before anything started with Ethan. He's just hurt and lashing out." Todd told me he'd already corrected the record with their friend group, telling everyone what Ryan actually said at his barbecue about me being just for fun. He said most of the guys felt bad for believing Ryan's version at first. Then Todd surprised me again. He apologized for his own part in that conversation. "I feel guilty for laughing along when Ryan was talking about you like you were temporary," he confessed. "I should have said something right then instead of being a bystander to my friend disrespecting you." He finished by saying, "I'm glad you found out before wasting more years on someone who didn't value you." I thanked him, truly grateful. It meant a lot that someone from Ryan's inner circle was willing to stand up for the truth, even if it meant going against his friend. 3 months into dating Ethan, we took a weekend trip to this little beach town I'd always wanted to visit. With Ryan, trips were always stressful. He'd plan everything without asking my input, then get mad if I wanted to change anything. This trip with Ethan was completely different. We decided together where to eat, what to do each day. When I wanted to skip the museum to spend more time at the beach, Ethan just smiled and said, "Sounds perfect." When he wanted to try a seafood place and I wasn't feeling it, we found somewhere else. No tension, no drama. Everything felt easy, natural, like we were actual partners making decisions together. On our last night there, sitting on the beach, watching the sunset, Ethan got quiet for a minute. Then he turned to me. "I'm falling in love with you," he said. He admitted he'd actually been falling since those first coffee dates, when I was still healing from Ryan. He said watching me rebuild my confidence over the past months had been beautiful, and he felt lucky I'd given him a chance despite the complicated family situation. My heart raced. Tears pricked my eyes. Nobody had ever talked about loving me like that. Ryan said, "I love you plenty," but it always felt routine, like something you're supposed to say. This felt different. "I love you too," I told Ethan, and I meant it in a way I'd never meant it before. With Ryan, I was always trying to earn his commitment, to prove I was worth keeping. With Ethan, it felt like partnership, mutual respect. It felt like we were choosing each other every day, instead of me chasing someone who was already checked out. We sat on that beach, holding each other, and I felt more secure than I had in years. When we got back home, I posted a few photos from the trip, not thinking much of it. 2 days later, I woke up to a long email from Ryan in my inbox. Subject line, "We need to talk." My stomach dropped again. I opened it. It was 3 paragraphs of accusations. How I never truly loved him, how I just used him for stability, how I'd probably been planning to leave him for Ethan the whole time, that our entire relationship was a lie. He went on about how I'd manipulated him and wasted his time when he could have been finding someone who actually cared. He had even copied his mom on the email, which seemed intentional, like he wanted her to see his version of events. I read it twice, and instead of sadness, I felt anger. Pure, righteous anger. He was rewriting history, trying to make himself the victim, when he was the one who called me temporary, who kept me around while waiting for his ex. I didn't respond to Ryan, but I did forward the entire email to his mom with a simple message. "I thought you should see what he's sending." 20 minutes later, she called me, apologizing profusely again. She said she was going to have a serious talk with her son about moving on and accepting that our relationship was over. She sounded tired, frustrated with Ryan's behavior. A few days later, she texted, asking if I wanted to meet for lunch. I said yes, nervous about what she wanted to discuss. We met at a little cafe. She seemed different, more serious than usual. She told me she'd been going to therapy herself, dealing with her guilt about how Ryan turned out. She admitted she'd spoiled him growing up, made excuses for his bad behavior instead of holding him accountable. She said she was trying to do better now, and part of that meant being honest about her mistakes. She told me she was sorry for enabling Ryan's treatment of me, for not seeing the signs that he wasn't serious about our future. Then she said something that made me start crying all over again. "I think of you as a daughter, regardless of which cousin you're dating," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I hope you'll still come to family events." She said she'd grown to love me over the 5 years I was with Ryan, and that didn't just disappear because we broke up. Watching me with Ethan, she added, made her happy because she could see I was actually valued and respected. I told her I'd love to stay part of the family, and that I was so grateful she wasn't shutting me out because of Ryan. Sitting there with her, I realized I wasn't losing a family by leaving Ryan. I was actually gaining one, because now they saw me as my own person, not just Ryan's girlfriend. A week after that lunch, I started packing up my stuff from the apartment I'd been renting since leaving Ryan. Ethan came over with boxes, and we started talking seriously about finding a place together. We were already spending every night at one place or the other anyway. He pulled out his phone and showed me apartment listings he'd already been looking at, all in neighborhoods on the opposite side of town from where Ryan lived. "I want you to feel safe," he said, "not worry about running into Ryan at the grocery store or coffee shop." We spent that evening circling ads, making calls to set up tours for the weekend. The first apartment was too small, the second had weird layout issues, but the third place felt right immediately. It was a 2-bedroom unit in a newer building, a doorman at the front desk, security cameras in the lobby. The kitchen had updated appliances, and the living room had big windows that let in tons of natural light. Ethan walked through each room with me, asking my thoughts on everything. We stood in the empty bedroom that would be our room, and he said, "This could be our fresh start." The rent was higher than what I'd been paying, but Ethan, ever the partner, said he wanted to cover more of it since he made more money at his job. We sat in his car after the tour and had an actual, adult conversation about splitting bills fairly. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his phone, showing what he thought made sense based on our incomes. I'd never had a partner treat finances like a team decision before. Ryan always acted like he was doing me a favor by letting me split everything 50-50, even though he made twice what I did. We applied for the apartment that night and got approved 3 days later. I texted Ethan the good news, and he called me immediately, saying he'd already started packing his stuff. The next week, we were signing the lease, getting keys, planning our move-in date. I posted a photo of the keys on social media, not really thinking much about it. 2 days before we were supposed to move, someone started pounding on Ethan's apartment door at 9 at night. Ethan looked through the peephole, and his whole body went tense. "It's Ryan," he told me. "Stay in the bedroom." I heard him open the door, and Ryan's voice, loud and angry, boomed through the apartment. "Is it true? Are you two moving in together?" Ethan's voice stayed calm. "That's not your business anymore, Ryan." Ryan got louder, demanding, "How could you betray family like this? You're a snake." Ethan's response was sharp. "You need to leave right now, or I'm calling the police." Ryan kept yelling, accusing me of turning his own cousin against him, of ruining his life. Ethan repeated that he was calling the cops, and I heard him actually dial. Ryan's voice grew even louder. "Ethan betrayed the whole family. I'll never forgive either of you." Then I heard footsteps stomping away and a door slam. Ethan came back into the bedroom and sat down on the bed next to me. His face looked sad in a way I hadn't seen before. I realized this whole situation was costing him too, even though he never complained about losing his relationship with Ryan. I took his hand. "If you want to try fixing things with your cousin," I told him, "I'd understand. I'd support whatever you need to do." Ethan shook his head. "There's nothing to fix," he said, his voice quiet. "Ryan's just mad about facing consequences for his own choices. Family doesn't mean accepting disrespect, and Ryan needs to grow up." We sat there in a comfortable silence for a minute, then went back to packing boxes. Moving day came, and Ethan's brother Eric showed up with a borrowed truck. Ryan's mom came too, with her husband, and they helped carry furniture and boxes up to our new place. She even brought a housewarming gift, a lovely set of kitchen towels with a card that simply said she was happy for us. Having his family there, making it clear they supported us, meant everything. We got everything moved in one day, and spent that night eating pizza on the floor, surrounded by boxes, laughing. Over the next few weeks, we unpacked, slowly making the apartment feel like home. I hung pictures, Ethan assembled furniture, we even had a minor, playful argument about where the couch should go. It felt easy, natural, in a way living with Ryan never had. I stopped hearing from Ryan directly, But mutual friends told me he'd been going on dates with different women every week, posting photos trying to show how great his life was without me. It didn't bother me at all. I was genuinely happy, and he simply wasn't on my mind anymore. For months passed, and Ethan suggested we host a dinner party to celebrate having our own place. We invited Mila and some of my other friends, plus Eric, Ryan's parents, and Cheryl. I spent the day cooking while Ethan cleaned and set up the dining room. People started arriving around 6, and the apartment filled with conversation and laughter. Mila pulled me aside in the kitchen while I was checking on the roast. "I've never seen you this relaxed and happy in a relationship," she said, her eyes warm. "With Ryan, you always seemed like you were trying to prove something, but with Ethan, you just seem like yourself." Cheryl showed up a little late with a guy she introduced as her boyfriend of 2 months. She told everyone at dinner that watching my relationship with Ethan had actually inspired her to demand better treatment from the men she dated. Her boyfriend seemed nice, keeping his arm around her chair while they talked. After everyone left, and we were cleaning up, Ethan and I collapsed on the couch, exhausted but deeply satisfied. The next morning, Ryan's mom called. She asked if we were coming to Thanksgiving at her house. "Ryan will be there too," she added gently. "But I expect everyone to act like adults and be civil." Ethan and I sat at the kitchen table, discussing whether we were ready for that level of family drama. He argued that we shouldn't let Ryan control our lives by avoiding family events. I agreed, but still felt a knot of nerves in my stomach. We decided we'd go, but leave immediately if Ryan started anything. Ethan promised his brother Eric would run interference if needed. I marked Thanksgiving on the calendar and tried not to think too much about how awkward it would inevitably be. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up with my stomach in knots. Ethan brought me coffee in bed while I tried to decide what to wear. He sat on the edge of the mattress, reminding me again that we could leave anytime. His brother Eric called around 10, confirming he'd be there early to keep Ryan occupied, if necessary. We got dressed and drove to his parents' house with a store-bought pie. I'd been too nervous to bake. Cars already filled the driveway when we arrived, and I recognized Ryan's truck parked near the garage. Ethan squeezed my hand before we got out, carrying the pie while I walked beside him up to the front door. His mom answered, hugging us both, thanking us for coming, and whispering, "Everything will be fine." Inside, the house smelled of turkey and stuffing, family members filling the living room, talking and laughing. Ryan sat on the couch with his dad, watching football. He glanced up when we walked in, but immediately looked back at the television. Eric came over, clapped Ethan on the shoulder, and asked if we wanted drinks from the kitchen. We followed him, and I felt myself relax slightly, grateful to be away from the main room. Cheryl was in there mashing potatoes, and she smiled warmly when she saw me. "Glad you came," she said. The afternoon passed slowly with everyone making small talk, pretending the tension wasn't there. Ryan stayed quiet during dinner, barely looking in our direction when passing dishes. He sat at the opposite end of the table, focused on his food, while conversation flowed around him. After we finished eating, his mom pulled me aside into the hallway. She told me Ryan had been seeing a therapist for the past month. "He's working through his feelings about the breakup," she explained, "and learning to accept that you've moved on." I felt a wave of relief. Hearing he was getting help, rather than just staying angry, was a genuine comfort. She hugged me. "I hope eventually, family gatherings will feel normal again for everyone." Later that evening, after most people had gone home, Ryan found me alone in the kitchen, putting away leftovers. He stood in the doorway for a minute before asking if we could talk privately. My heart started racing, but I nodded and followed him out to the back porch. It was cold and quiet outside. He shoved his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground, before finally speaking. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, "for how I treated you during our relationship, and especially after the breakup." He admitted he took me for granted, that he never appreciated what we had until it was gone. He said he understood why I left, even though it hurt watching you with Ethan. His voice cracked a little when he mentioned his cousin's name, and I could tell this conversation was genuinely hard for him. He explained his therapist was helping him see how his obsession with the past had ruined his present. He looked at me then. "I know we can't be friends," he said, "but I hope you can forgive me eventually." I told him I accepted his apology, but that I needed him to respect my boundaries going forward. I said I didn't want awkward encounters or weird tension at family events anymore. He agreed, saying he was trying to move on with his life and hoped someday the family gatherings wouldn't feel so uncomfortable. We stood there in silence for a moment, then went back inside separately. Ethan was waiting in the living room, and he searched my face when I sat down next to him. I told him later in the car what Ryan had said, and Ethan seemed relieved that his cousin was finally dealing with things properly. Christmas and New Year's passed much more smoothly after that conversation with Ryan. He showed up to family events, but kept his distance, acting civil when we had to interact. I stopped watching for his reactions every time Ethan touched me or we laughed together. His mom hosted a New Year's dinner, and Ryan even made a joke that included both of us, without a trace of bitterness in his voice. Ethan noticed the change in me, and told me one night that he was proud of how I handled everything with such grace. Watching me navigate the family drama while staying kind, he said, had made him fall even more in love with me. January came, and life settled into a comfortable routine in our apartment. We both went back to work after the holidays, falling into easy patterns of cooking dinner together, watching shows on the couch. But then, Ethan started acting slightly different in ways I couldn't quite pinpoint. He'd take phone calls in the bedroom with the door closed. He got protective of his laptop when I walked by. A few times I caught him quickly closing browser tabs when I came into the room. My stomach would drop every time it happened. It reminded me so much of how Ryan used to act secretive about checking his ex's social media. But I forced myself to trust Ethan. I wouldn't let Ryan's behavior poison this beautiful, new relationship. I didn't snoop through his phone or demand to know who he was talking to. I chose to believe that Ethan had earned my trust over these months. 2 weeks into January, Ethan told me to dress nice because he was taking me out to dinner. He seemed incredibly nervous getting ready, kept checking his phone, which was unusual for him since he usually ignored it when we were together. We drove to the very same restaurant where we'd had our first official date, back when I was freshly single and scared to start over. He held my hand across the table, but seemed distracted during our meal. He kept glancing at his phone, and I started to worry something was seriously wrong. After we finished our main courses, he excused himself to the bathroom and was gone for almost 10 minutes. When he came back, the waiter brought out dessert, even though we hadn't ordered any. Ethan barely touched his chocolate cake, instead watching me eat mine with this intense, almost trembling look on his face. I asked if he was okay, and he said, "I'm perfect," but his voice shook a little. Then, suddenly, he pushed his chair back and got down on one knee right there in the middle of the restaurant. My fork clattered onto my plate, and my whole body froze. He pulled a small, velvet box from his jacket pocket and opened it to show me a ring. "I know it's only been 6 months," he began, his voice a little shaky, but full of conviction, "but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You deserve someone who sees you as their forever from day one, and I want to be that person for you. Will you marry me?" I was crying before he even finished talking, nodding and saying yes, over and over while he slid the ring onto my finger. The whole restaurant erupted in applause, and the couple at the next table raised their glasses to us. I realized, sitting there, tears running down my face, that this was what I thought I'd have with Ryan after 5 years of waiting. But Ethan was giving it to me after 6 months because he was actually sure about us. He didn't need years to figure out what he wanted. The ring fit perfectly, a simple band with a beautiful round stone that caught the light, and I could tell he'd put real thought into choosing it based on things I'd mentioned liking. Ethan paid the bill quickly, and we left the restaurant, me still staring at my ring in disbelief. In the car, he admitted he'd been planning this for weeks, and that's why he'd been so secretive. He'd even gotten approval from my parents when he visited them last month, supposedly for work. He'd asked his own parents, and even called his aunt, Ryan's mom, to make sure the timing felt right, and that I was ready for this step. Hearing that he'd put so much care into planning everything made me cry all over again. We drove home, and I kept looking at the ring on my finger, thinking about how different this felt from all those years of dropping hints to Ryan about marriage. Ethan had wanted this as much as I did, and hadn't needed me to convince him or wait for the perfect moment. He'd just known and acted on it, because that's who he was. We sat in the car outside our apartment building, and Ethan pulled out his phone to start making calls. He called his parents first, putting them on speaker so I could hear their excited reactions. His mom started crying happy tears, and his dad congratulated us both, saying he knew Ethan had been planning something special. They asked when we were thinking about the wedding, and Ethan squeezed my hand, saying we hadn't gotten that far yet, but probably within the year. Next, I call my parents. My mom screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She demanded to see the ring immediately, and I promised to send pictures as soon as we hung up. My dad got on the line and, in a warm, happy voice, told Ethan he better take good care of his daughter. Then Ethan called Ryan's mom. She was basically his aunt, after all, and had always been close to his side of the family. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear the smile in her voice when Ethan told her the news. She congratulated us both and said she was thrilled. Then there was this pause that stretched too long. She cleared her throat and mentioned she would need to tell Ryan. And my stomach dropped, even though I'd known this was coming. Ethan told her not to worry about it, that we understood it might be awkward for Ryan to hear. She said she'd handle it sensitively and that we shouldn't let Ryan's reaction ruin our engagement night. After we hung up, Ethan kissed me and said everything was going to be fine. We drove home, and I kept looking at the ring on my finger, trying not to think about how Ryan would take the news. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Ryan. It simply said, "Congratulations and hope you're both happy." It seemed genuine, even though I could feel the sadness behind it. I showed Ethan, and he read it without much reaction, just nodded and said, "That was mature of Ryan." A few days later, Ryan's mom called me directly, which surprised me. I figured she'd keep some distance now that I was marrying Ethan instead of her son. She asked how I was doing and if wedding planning had started yet. We talked for a while, and then she mentioned that Ryan was actually dating someone new, and it seemed pretty serious. She said he'd been in therapy and was working on himself, and meeting this new girl had really helped him move forward. I felt this incredible weight lift off my chest. I'd been carrying some guilt about moving on so fast, but knowing Ryan had found someone too made everything feel less complicated. She told me not to feel bad about any of it, and that sometimes things just work out the way they're supposed to. Wedding planning started the next week, and it was completely different from what I'd imagined it would be like with Ryan. Ethan actually had opinions about things like the venue, the food, the music. He sat with me, looking through options, and gave real feedback instead of just saying, "Whatever you want is fine." When we disagreed about something, we talked it through and found middle ground without either of us getting upset. He wanted a smaller wedding, focused on close family and friends, and I agreed because big, elaborate weddings had never been my thing anyway. We picked a date 6 months out, which felt fast, but also felt perfectly right since we'd already been living together. Ethan helped me make lists, call vendors, and never once complained about wedding planning being boring or too much. He got excited about details like the cake flavors and what songs we'd dance to. I kept thinking about how Ryan used to change the subject whenever I brought up wedding stuff, and how utterly different this felt. 2 months into planning, Cheryl called me and asked if we could meet for coffee. I figured she wanted to talk about the wedding, or maybe give me some sisterly advice about marrying into the family. We met at our usual spot, and she seemed nervous, stirring her coffee without drinking it. Finally, she blurted out, "Have you already picked your bridesmaids? Because I was wondering if you'd consider having me in the wedding party." I just stared at her for a second, completely dumbfounded. I honestly hadn't expected that. She said she knew it might be weird since she was Ryan's sister, but we'd become real friends over the past months, and she wanted to be part of my day. I said, yes, before I even fully thought about it, because she was right. We had become friends. She hugged me right there in the coffee shop, saying she was so happy. Walking back to my car, I realized that having Ryan's sister as my bridesmaid felt like tangible proof that I'd gained a family instead of losing one. The whole situation could have torn the family apart, but instead, I was closer to them than ever. Ryan's mom insisted on throwing me a bridal shower, even though I told her she didn't have to. "I've been planning your shower in my head for years," she said firmly. "And I'm not going to miss out just because you're marrying Ethan instead of Ryan." She invited both sides of the family and some of my friends, and on the day of the shower, I was nervous about how everyone would mix. Ryan didn't come, which I'd expected, but he sent a really nice gift with a card that wished me happiness. Everyone at the shower kept commenting on how mature he was being, how much he'd grown. My friends from work were there, and Cheryl, and some of Ethan's cousins, and it felt like my two lives were truly blending together. We played the usual shower games and opened presents, and I felt surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. Ryan's mom gave a little speech about how she'd always thought of me as a daughter, and that wasn't changing just because of how things worked out. She said she was grateful I was staying in the family and couldn't wait to officially call me her daughter-in-law. Near the end of the shower, Ryan's grandmother pulled me aside into the kitchen. She was this tiny old woman who didn't talk much at family dinners, but always watched everything with sharp, knowing eyes. She took my hand. "I knew from that very first dinner that Ryan didn't appreciate you enough," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I watched how you helped me with my walker without being asked, and how you made sure I had everything I needed. And I thought then that Ryan was lucky." But she added, "I also noticed that he never looked at you the way Ethan does. Ethan looks at you the way my husband looked at me. And that's how you know it's real love." She squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you found that kind of love, even if it took a complicated path to get there." I hugged her, tears pricking my eyes, because her words meant more than she probably knew. The wedding day arrived 6 months after Ethan proposed. We picked a small venue with room for about 70 people, just close family and friends. I got ready with my bridesmaids, including Cheryl, and my mom kept crying every time she looked at me in my dress. The ceremony was short and simple, the kind of wedding I'd always actually wanted. Both families sat together, without any tension, and I could see Ryan's mom in the front row, openly wiping away tears. When Ethan and I said our vows, I felt completely sure about everything. No doubts, no worries, just pure, unadulterated certainty. He promised to always choose me first, and to never make me question my place in his life. I promised to trust him and build a real partnership together. After we kissed and walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, I caught Ryan's mom openly crying happy tears. She hugged both of us afterward and said it was the most beautiful ceremony she'd ever seen. The reception was relaxed and fun, nothing fancy or stressful. Ryan showed up with his girlfriend, a nice woman who seemed genuinely good for him. They sat at a table with some of his friends and seemed comfortable together. During the cocktail hour, Ryan came up to us, congratulated Ethan, shaking his hand and actually seeming sincere about it. He told me I looked beautiful and that he hoped we'd be happy together. His girlfriend stood next to him, smiling, and I could tell she knew the whole story, but wasn't bothered by it. They left early, saying they wanted to give us space to celebrate, and I appreciated that gesture immensely. After they left, I felt like I could finally relax completely and just enjoy being married. Ethan and I danced and ate cake and talked to everyone, and it felt perfect in a simple, real way. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks in Hawaii, something we planned together based on places we both wanted to see. We spent days on the beach, hiking, trying new restaurants, and it was the most relaxed I'd ever felt. Ethan told me one night, while we were watching the sunset, that he felt like the luckiest man alive. He said he'd never imagined when he came back from overseas that he'd end up married to me, but now he couldn't imagine any other life. I realized, sitting there, that I felt exactly the same way. I felt lucky that I'd overheard that conversation at Todd's barbecue, because without it, I might have stayed with Ryan for years more. I felt lucky that I'd had the courage to leave and start over. And I felt lucky that Ethan had seen something in me worth pursuing, even when it complicated his family relationships. We came back from the honeymoon to our apartment, and real married life started. Nothing felt dramatically different since we'd already been living together. But somehow, everything felt more solid, more permanent. Ethan kept being attentive and considerate, just like he always had been, asking about my day, helping with chores, planning date nights. I watched him unpack from the honeymoon and put his clothes away neatly, and I thought about how this was what partnership actually looked like. It wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about someone consistently showing up and choosing you, and making you feel valued every single day. Ryan had taught me what I didn't want, and Ethan was showing me what I deserved. I felt confident about our future together in a way I'd never felt before. And I knew this was just the beginning of building something real. 3 months after the honeymoon, Mila called me, screaming that she was engaged. Her boyfriend proposed at the beach where they had their first date, and she couldn't stop talking about how perfect it was. She asked if I'd be her maid of honor, and I said yes immediately, already tearing up on the phone. We met for coffee the next day to start planning, and she grabbed my hand across the table, her eyes shining. "You inspired me to stop settling," she said. "Watching you leave Ryan and find someone who actually prioritized you made me realize I deserved the same thing." She'd been dating guys who treated her like an option for years. And after seeing my situation, she finally demanded better. Her fiancé was someone who made her feel valued from day one, just like Ethan did for me. I hugged her and said I was so happy she found her person. 2 weeks later, Ryan's mom called and invited Ethan and me to a family dinner at her house. She said she had an announcement to make and wanted everyone there. We showed up on Saturday, and the whole family was gathered in the dining room. Ryan was there with his girlfriend, a woman named Jessica, who seemed nice enough. His mom stood up after we finished eating and clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. She announced that Ryan and Jessica got engaged last weekend. Everyone started clapping and congratulating them. Ryan looked genuinely happy, not forced or fake like I'd worried he might. Jessica was beaming, showing off her ring to Ryan's grandmother. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table, and I realized I felt relieved more than anything. The family dynamic finally felt balanced, with both cousins engaged and moving forward with their lives. Nobody was stuck in the past or holding on to hurt feelings. After dinner, Ryan approached me in the kitchen while I was refilling my water glass. He asked how married life was treating me. I told him it was great, that Ethan and I were really happy. He said that was good to hear, and he was glad we worked out. I asked about Jessica, and he lit up talking about her, explaining how they met at his gym and connected over their love of hiking. He seemed genuinely content, not bitter or resentful like he'd been at our wedding. We talked for maybe 5 minutes about normal stuff like jobs and apartment hunting since he and Jessica were looking for a place together. It felt like we'd both finally moved past the hurt and anger. I was grateful we could exist in the same family space without tension or awkwardness. When Ethan and I left that night, I told him it felt like closure in a weird way, seeing Ryan happy with someone else. Our first anniversary came up faster than I expected. Ethan surprised me by taking me back to that coffee shop where we'd met up alone for the first time, when I was still technically with Ryan. We sat at the same table by the window, ordered the same drinks we'd had that day. He held my hand. I fell in love with you over coffee, he reminded me, before we even started dating officially. Watching you talk about your work presentation that day, seeing how passionate you were about your career, it made me realize you were someone special. I told him I was grateful every single day that I gave him a chance despite how complicated it was with Ryan. Life turned out so much better than I ever imagined it could when I was standing in Todd's kitchen, hearing my entire relationship fall apart around me. I wouldn't change anything about how it all happened because it led me here, to this coffee shop, with someone who saw me as his forever from the very beginning. That's how it went for me. But I know some of you would have handled it totally differently. Let me know in the comments.